Hello and welcome. Today, we are digging into a really fascinating puzzle. How do you measure success when profit isn't even part of the equation? For not-for-profit organizations, the goal is all about making an impact. But how in the world do you put a number on that?
Think about it. For any regular business, success is pretty straightforward, right? You look at revenue, you look at profit, you look at the share price. But what about a charity that's funding education or a community group that's cleaning up a local river? You're not going to find their success on a balance sheet. So, how do they prove their value to donors, to volunteers, and to the very people they're trying to help?
So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about what success even looks like when you can't put a price tag on it. Then we're going to unpack the three biggest challenges that not-for-profit organizations, or NPOs, run into. After that, we'll introduce a really powerful framework for measuring value, break down its key parts, and then wrap it all up with a super quick recap. Okay, let's jump right into our first section, success beyond profit. This really needs a total shift in how you think, because in the not-for-profit world, the mission is the measure of success. It's not about making money, it's about creating real, tangible, positive change. And this slide really gets to the absolute core of the problem. A business can just point to its financial statements, but how do you quantify the amazing ripple effect of a mentorship program or the long-term benefit of a conservation project? Measuring these kinds of intangible outcomes, well, that's the central puzzle for every single NPO out there. So what are these specific challenges we're talking about? Well, the source material points to three key hurdles. But let's not think of them as roadblocks. Instead, let's see them as these intricate puzzles that leaders of NPOs have to solve to show how effective they really are. Let's break them down. First up, we've got the huge challenge of trying to quantify the benefits. I mean, it's incredibly tough to stick a dollar value on the positive change that NPOs create. You know, the cost of running a soup kitchen, that's clear. But the value of the dignity and the nutrition it provides, that's way more abstract. And it has these long-term benefits for society that are almost impossible to measure. This quote just nails the issue perfectly. The cost of a teacher's salary is right here, right now. It's an immediate expense. But the benefit, that student becoming a doctor 20 years down the line, that's a profound but seriously delayed return on investment. This massive time lag makes any kind of traditional cost-benefit analysis pretty much useless. So what's the solution then? Just throw your hands up? No, the source suggests a much more practical approach. Look, you can't get perfect numbers, but NPOs can use concepts like opportunity value, basically what other good could we have done with this money, and relative cost, how does our program stack up against similar ones? It's all about creating a logical way to make decisions, even if you're working with estimates. And this brings us to a really critical insight. Anytime you try to assign a financial value to an NPO's impact, it's going to have limits, mainly because of those time gaps we just talked about. So the key takeaway here is that you just can't rely on financial metrics alone to understand how well an NPO is actually performing. Okay, the second hurdle is a really complex one, dependence on the state. A lot of NPOs work in areas like healthcare and education, which, are also the main responsibility of the government. And this creates this deep and often pretty tricky interdependence between them. The food bank example on this slide is just perfect. Its success is directly tied to things that are completely outside of its control, like government policy. If the state suddenly improves food security, the food bank's role might actually shrink. But if state funding gets cut, that same food bank could be completely overwhelmed. Its performance is always tied to decisions made somewhere else. And that brings us to our third puzzle, multiple and often conflicting objectives. NPOs have to serve a whole range of different stakeholders. You've got the donors, the volunteers, and of course the beneficiaries themselves. The real challenge is that these groups often have very different and sometimes competing priorities. So how do you possibly navigate all of these competing demands? Well, the solution is all about prioritization. The source material is super clear on this. You prioritize based on two key factors. First, importance. What's the actual utility or benefit of the objective? And second, urgency. What's the time frame? This gives you a really clear roadmap for taking action. Okay, so we've worked through the three big hurdles, quantifying benefits depending on the state and juggling conflicting goals. It seems pretty complicated, right? But believe it or not, there's a really elegant solution, a framework that's designed to bring a little bit of order to all this chaos. This is the big question, isn't it? It's what donors, managers, and regulators all want to know. How do you actually demonstrate that every single dollar is being used to create the absolute maximum possible good?
And the answer lies in something called the value for money, or VFM framework. Now, this has nothing to do with profit. It's all about maximizing the impact of every single dollar that comes in the door. It gives you a structured way to ask, are we achieving the greatest possible good with the limited resources we have?
So now we're going to break down the 3 core pillars of this VFM framework. And we're going to use some simple logic to make it easy to understand. But for those of you who are studying this formally, we'll also include the precise exam keywords you're going to need.
First up is economy. The simple way to think about it is spend less. Now, in technical terms, economy is what we call an input measure. It asks, are we buying our resources, everything from laptops to medical supplies, at the best possible price for the quality we need? So imagine a charity negotiating bulk discounts on textbooks. That's economy in action. Next, we've got efficiency. The logic here is spend well. This is all about the process of turning your inputs into outputs. Technically, efficiency is a process measure. It's the ratio of what you produce to what you use to produce it. For instance, how many meals can a food bank prepare per hour? That's a classic measure of efficiency. And finally, we have effectiveness. The simple logic is spend wisely. And honestly, this is the ultimate test. Effectiveness is an output measure that asks the big question, did we actually achieve our mission? It doesn't matter if you got cheap textbooks, that's economy, and handed them out quickly, that's efficiency, if the students' reading levels didn't actually improve. Effectiveness measures the real impact.
All right, let's lock all that knowledge in with a really quick recap and then a final thought for you to take with you.
So let's do a quick fire recap. We've got economy, spending less, efficiency, spending well, and effectiveness, spending wisely. But wait, the modern VFM framework has actually expanded to include 2 more really crucial elements. There's equity, which asks if we are spending fairly and reaching everyone we're supposed to. And then there's ethics, which makes sure we are spending properly and with total integrity.
And this is how it all connects. These 5 principles, economy, efficiency, effectiveness, equity, and ethics, they form this unbreakable chain, linking the initial funding all the way to real-world impact. It's a seriously powerful tool for accountability and for telling the complete story of an NPO's value.
So our final thought is for you. Now that you're armed with this framework, how are you going to look at the nonprofits that you support? It really shifts your perspective from just giving to truly understanding the value that's being created. Thanks so much for joining us.